Hello and welcome to Module 4, our look ahead at the post-procurement phases. I'm so pleased to be joined today by Jyoti Bisbey, who is a global expert with more than 20 years of experience in leading green infrastructure finance and public-private partnerships, or PPPs, in developing countries. She has worked at the World Bank Group and the United Nations with developing countries on supporting governments' public investment pipelines, preparing PPP projects, and financing the decarbonization of infrastructure. Jyoti is an executive committee member of the World Association of PPP Units and PPP Professionals, that's WAP, the Sustainable and Innovative Financing Advisory Board member of InfraBlocks Technologies Pte. Ltd., and the associate editor of the Journal of Infrastructure, Policy and Development at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, part of the National University of Singapore. She has published extensively on a variety of topics, including bringing green and inclusive infrastructure development through private sector financing in public investments. Jyoti holds an MBA from George Washington University and an undergraduate degree in mathematics from St. Stephen's College in Delhi, India. Jyoti recently co-authored, this is August of 2022, a very insightful article, Integrating Climate Risk Management in Infrastructure PPPs in Developing Countries, Key Concepts, Best Practices, and Broader Considerations. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I've just shared your bio, which of course highlights your extensive experience and career in infrastructure, climate finance, and PPP in those spaces. However, I did want to add and share that you recently were recognized with a 2021 Mentor of the Year nomination from the World Bank Group. You had mentioned at the time that one of your life's goals is to be a good mentor and mentee, and it was such an honor for you. And I just wanted to reiterate again, it was of no surprise to me that you received this recognition. And I'm sure anyone who's interacted with you would share the same view. Jyoti, you're so generous with your time, your knowledge, and your expertise. And I'm truly grateful for your contribution to the infrastructure space and, of course, your time and generosity today with me. So thank you for joining. And I'm sure that your reflections and your insights will be really valuable to the participants of this Climate Smart Policy and Procurement course. So thank you, Jyoti, for being with me today.
Thank you so much, Doreen. It's really a pleasure to be here and share my views with you and with everyone in your course. And looking forward to more things coming our way.
Excellent. Thank you. So I'll delve into the questions, Jyoti. So the first question I had, just in terms of providing context, it would be great to hear from you your views on why PPPs are important as we delve into, of course, delivering climate resilient infrastructure, both in developing countries as well as developed countries.
All right, well, that's a great question to start with, actually, and really nice to meet you all. So I think what's the difference? So PPPs, or public-private partnerships, which we call, are basically a long-term relationship between governments and private companies. So normally in this relationship, government is a procuring agent and private company is a service provider.
Yes.
The relationship is definitely contractual. Now the question is what distinguishes and relevant to what you're asking, the day-to-day contracts and the procurement notices, for example, which are issued by a city municipality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
Actually the best explanation is, let's take an example of a municipal waste collection and disposal project.
Mm-hmm.
A traditional service contract of about 6 months to 1 year will pay the company for collection and disposal, right, no matter what the level of service is. The trucks, the equipment, subcontracts, the disposal and recycling, they're all provided by the municipality. The residents are actually paying the city for services. On the other hand, in a PPP, the key performance indicators, or KPIs, will define the unitary payment of the service.
Right.
So the company will provide the infrastructure, the equipment, labor, and will finance these costs upfront. The KPIs, for example, could be collection on time and consistently, volume of collection, number of complaints from residents, volume of recycling, use of electric trucks, cleanliness of disposal, ensuring residents are sorting the trash by types of recyclables. They could be anything as long as they are results oriented. Right. This contract definitely will be longer for 5 to 6 years or even more. So the company can provide the right equipment, staff, and it can solicit subcontracts or recycling, etc. Right. So in most cases, the residents will continue to pay the city for services. And the city will pay the KPI-based payment to the private company. And the private company will respond to the needs or the KPIs of the contract. So this transfers the risk of performance, operation, financing to the private company. So if they don't perform, they don't get paid. So the process could be a green procurement and ensure that appropriate environmental standards are applied to the waste collection and disposal. Having a PPP, I think it's important for everybody to know, having a PPP doesn't mean government will not have any role in the service. This is a misconception. City government will continue to be in the driver's seat to ensure that their objectives to provide a safe and healthy environment for the residents are fulfilled. So I hope this is helpful.
Definitely. Those are great insights, and it really reinforces a number of things that we talk about in the course. One being the misconceptions, sometimes that relate to public-private partnerships. That the government then loses control or is not involved, and also it reinforces the concepts of key performance indicators and how important it is to identify those appropriate targets right up front and share with the bidders through the procurement process, and then have those flow through into the contract or for performance monitoring and ongoing obligations, and really those tied to incentives for payment. So definitely very useful insights there. Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you. I'll move on to the next question that I had. In your article, which I've introduced, of course, you've identified 3 relevant categories of climate-related risks in the context of infrastructure PPPs: physical risks, transition risks, and liability risks. Would you share your insights on each of these risks, what each is, perhaps share an example, and how they relate to infrastructure PPPs?
All right. Yes, I think these 3 risks, the concept of them is very important to understand. So I will take my time to explain each of them and give an example. So these 3 risks, and let me take a step back. These 3 risks were mentioned by Mr. Mark Carney when he was a governor of Bank of England back in 2015 or 16. So they are in existence for some time, and back then it was talk. They were discussing in terms of the financial stability of the more microeconomic risks, but they are so relevant to every aspect of what we do in infrastructure and PPP. So the risks are defined by the timing of the event, the materiality of the event, and the relationship of the event to the entity bearing responsibility. So these 3 criteria. So keep that in mind. So physical risks are which happen today due to an extreme natural event. Lately, we are seeing, for example, more and more extreme weather occurring, such as hurricanes, floods, and droughts. They used to be 100 or 50-year events, but the probability is increasing each year. So this distinguishes the normal weather from climate change related events. Now, normal PPPs and contracts don't anticipate such events to occur so frequently, and as a result, costs, mitigation, insurance, all these are not included at the time of procurement. Forecasts, when you're doing the technical specifications, for example, are done based on historic data, right? So what happened before, and then you kind of extrapolate it to the future. And our models are really outdated, and it's difficult to predict which way the climate will change. So the second risk, liability risks, happen in the future. When, for example, when a bridge collapses in the future, or a series of health issues start occurring in a village, who bears the responsibility? The materiality of those occurrences, the underlying reasons. Let's say point to a coal fire power plant, which was in the village, or inferior materials used in the bridge. Then the liability could be called against a private company, even after the fact and years of construction. Now, transition risks occur during the process of change from a high carbon or a GHG model to a low or zero GHG emission model, transitioning out of thermal power driven energy sector to a renewable energy based economy. It cannot happen overnight, right? So it takes its time, it takes a process, including a legal framework, policies, budgeting, and then you start changing the infrastructure as well. It takes time to plan, fund, change, and fully convert. The process itself is complex, of course, and as it goes through several political cycles and asset revaluations, legal reform, budget reform, change of thinking and behavior amongst the people. Any kind of transition is going to cost. So now the question is, who bears the cost? Taxpayers or governments or insurance companies? How does the government fund the change? Developing countries are normally already struggling with money, right, to fund their investments to infrastructure. Right. So how does the transition kind of fit in? How do you, Indonesia, is, for example, has just announced it's going to change from coal fire to renewable energy. But what will happen to the existing coal fire plants? In fact, most of what we are going through is transition financing today, that we are in a transition phase. So some countries are ahead and some countries are falling behind. Right. So, these three risks kind of put these things in perspective. So I hope this makes it clear.
Wow. I mean, Jyoti, those, your explanations are so elegant, if I can use that word, in terms of, really giving those differences and nuances between those three categories of climate-related risks. So thank you very much. Of course, I'll be posting the link to your article and, more contained in the article as well. So thank you for that. The third question I have, Jyoti, I was very interested in the article and your comments on the important need to proactively communicate the existence of material climate-related risks to bidder and negotiate any resulting contractual revisions. And in thinking about this, I was seeing the mechanism of commercially confidential meetings, also known as collaborative meetings. And actually, in a couple sessions ago, we talked about reference to these meetings as commercially in confidence meetings, various names or the same mechanism. And these are used during the open period of a procurement as a really positive tool to allow the private sector proponents or bidders to seek clarification, but also allow the public sector organization to fully understand the impact of the risks in the project, including climate-related risks. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
I think that's a great question. So I would say anything which promotes a better understanding and transparency of the contract is a good thing.
Yes.
All the way around. But this also requires that both parties need to be equally informed, well prepared. They should have ample capacity to collaborate and negotiate. The procurement process itself is competitive. That's the assumption, which brings more of a market-based pricing and results measurement regimen, right? So I think we need to keep in mind that in many instances, especially in developing countries, and I hope this conversation comes up in your course, unsolicited proposals are quite common, and they do not go through such rigor of market consultations. Now, you combine the uncertainty of climate risks in the equation, these projects will undoubtedly benefit the contractor and not the public procurement agency, and ultimately compromise the benefits to the users of the infrastructure. So in relation to the climate-related risks, all commercially confidential meetings, I believe, should provide equal information and all information to all proponents, which the public sector has and plans to include in the contract. CRRs are part of the project, and no one party should be privy to isolated information. I think that would skew the bids and consequently the KPIs of the project. the mitigation measures, I think, could be sensitive to each party, or could be that one party has more concerns on a particular CRR. I think more information upfront, which can be provided to all proponents, the better for the users, really.
Right, right. And those are fantastic insights, Jyoti. Thank you. And it really relates well to the conversations we were having about commercially confidential meetings, and that really important need to structure these properly in order to run a fair, open, and transparent procurement process. I mean, you hit the nail on the head in terms of ensuring that all the proponents have information, equal information, in order to be able to compare apples to apples. And these CCMs, or commercial confidential meetings, as we've discussed, really is probably it's the only time in the procurement process where the proponents are not receiving information at the same time. And that's why it has to be properly structured, both in terms of ensuring that the participants are well known who is going to be at the meetings, so that the public sector can organize themselves, ensuring that in the RFP, we have a mechanism to submit questions and submission deadlines for particular questions on specific issues. It's not a free-for-all. I think that was the basis of our discussion and what you've pointed out. And so that it could be on technical, like, for instance, climate-related risks. It could be on pricing. It could be on the contractual provisions. But it's an opportunity for the public sector to really have their internal meetings to answer the questions appropriately and ensure that the process continues to be fair, open, and transparent, usually overseen by a fairness advisor, an independent third party here in Canada anyways. So, those are really important points, ensuring the fairness, openness, and transparency of the procurement process. So thank you. Great insights. And my final question, in this module, we're talking about, of course, the post-procurement phase, contracts, and ongoing performance monitoring. I'd appreciate if you could kindly speak to the importance of reflecting climate resilient risks into the contractual agreement. And in particular, we would appreciate your insights on the ongoing contractual obligations and performance monitoring as they relate to climate resilient risks and infrastructure.
I think that's really that's really the basic two PPPs, right? Risk management. And I think, we are trying to distinguish CRR as CRR, more because people, I think today we don't recognize CRR as much as I think we should. But if you look at if you look at risk management, right, it's all about capping one's cost for the downsides during the contract. So each sector is different, each project is different.
Right.
Now, CRR starts at the beginning of the project, from cost benefit analysis to selection to procurement to contracting to implementation. And so my paper, I think, which you said that you've introduced to their class, it highlights the entry points for CRR at each stage of PPP project cycle. So the goal is to minimize the uncertainty in the contract, so each party knows what and how to do. Yes. So more unforeseen risks occurring during the contract due to climate, the more the risk of contract failure under the natural force majeure. Of course, now CRR, they all can be known at commercial close. Now, given the unprecedented times of climate crisis, the contracts must, I have to emphasize that, must anticipate risks. So they can be adjusted, changed, or even rewritten. Even normal circumstances, risks during entire 20-year contract period are impossible to predict. Right. And then you add the complexity of CRR. So if a 100-year event becomes more likely to happen more frequently, for example, such an extreme drought in my previous example, then who would bear the responsibility? A private party would still be responsible to deliver that KPI, let's say for an irrigation water delivery. Would the project insurance cover such losses? How far the government take the responsibility? And this is, I think, the important link in my paper, which connects these climate risks to a bigger issue of financial instability. As you aggregate the effects of infrastructure, they start to bite into fiscal obligations. So how far can you push the envelope? So when an extreme event happens, it doesn't just affect one project, it will affect all projects in aggregation. So contracts need to be agile so they can anticipate as much as possible, of course, the changes which could occur.
Right. Right. Fantastic points, of course, Jyoti. And, you've highlighted, that important need to identify, to anticipate all these risks so that they can be minimized and understood, by all the parties in this relationship. And also the need for contracts, I think you used the word agile, contracts to be agile to respond, to changes during the life of the contract. It's not, as we know, it's not a situation where the contract is now signed and it gets put into a drawer. Actually, I think, I've said that's where, hard work begins, in terms of enforcing the contract and doing those ongoing reporting and monitoring of all those contractual obligations. So thank you for your insights. That was my last question. Of course, Jyoti, thank you so much for, all these wonderful insights today, but also your contributions in the infrastructure and PPP space and the climate finance space. Totally appreciate all these contributions. I'll end it here, but this is Doreen Wong, and this is the Climate Smart Policy and Procurement course, a collaboration between the Climate Risk Institute and Robinson Global Management. Thanks again. Have a great day.
Thank you, Doreen. Bye.